For years, the honest answer to when will Europe get a real robotaxi service was somewhere between soon and we're not sure. The United States had Waymo expanding across multiple cities. China had Baidu and others deploying at scale. Europe had plenty of pilot programs, regulatory discussions, and promising press releases. What it didn't have was a commercial service that regular people could actually use. That changed when a Croatian startup called Vern put 10 self-driving electric SUVs on the streets of Zagreb and started taking passengers. The company behind this is backed by Mate Rimac, which immediately tells you something about the ambition involved. Rimac built his name producing electric hypercars of genuinely staggering performance, then engineered the merger that created Bugatti Rimac. He is not someone who enters a market to occupy second place. Vern, it turns out, has been developing quietly for nearly 7 years. A long runway that reflects how seriously the company has been taking the infrastructure and regulatory groundwork rather than rushing toward a headline. The service currently covers a 35 square mile zone across Zagreb, including the city's international airport, which is a strategically sensible starting point. Airport runs are high value, predictable in terms of routing, and tend to attract exactly the kind of early adopters who are curious about new technology and willing to try something unfamiliar. The promotional fare is set at €1.99, which is aggressively low by any standard, and clearly designed to get people through the door rather than generate meaningful revenue at this stage. Building public familiarity with the concept seems to be the primary objective right now, and cheap fares are a straightforward way to encourage that. The vehicles themselves are electric SUVs derived from the ArcFox Alpha T5, built by Chinese automaker BAIC. The autonomous driving technology comes from Pony AI, one of China's most serious players in Level 4 self-driving development. Vern handles fleet management and operations, while Uber is working toward integrating the service into its own platform. It's a multi-company ecosystem from the start, which is increasingly how this industry operates. Nobody builds everything themselves anymore, and the partnerships here are sensible ones. Pony AI brings proven autonomous technology. Uber brings an enormous existing customer base, and Vern provides the operational framework that ties it together on the ground. Now, to be precise about what autonomous currently means in practice here, there are trained safety operators sitting in the vehicles. Regulatory requirements in Europe demand this during the early deployment phase, and Vern isn't pretending otherwise. The operators don't drive, but they're there and capable of intervening if something goes wrong. Journalists who rode in the cars during preview sessions reported that intervention was rarely, if ever, needed during normal operation. And Vern has indicated it expects to phase the operators out before the end of the year, pending further approvals. That timeline is ambitious but not unreasonable, given how the technology has been performing. The preview ride accounts are worth noting because they describe something more composed than many people might expect. The autonomous system apparently managed lane changes, overtaking, and dense city traffic without the kind of hesitancy that plagued earlier self-driving demonstrations. One test drive produced an interesting moment when another driver drifted into the wrong lane, and the Robotaxi responded with a sharp stop before calmly continuing on. The car then issued an electronic apology to the passengers for the abrupt interruption. That last detail is a small thing, but it says something about how much thought has gone into the passenger experience alongside the pure driving capability. Someone decided that the car should acknowledge the disruption rather than simply continuing as if nothing happened. Why Zagreb specifically? Partly because Rimac is Croatian and has considerable influence and credibility in the country. Partly because Zagreb's traffic patterns and urban density make it a manageable environment for an initial deployment without being so straightforward that it fails to prove anything meaningful. And partly, one suspects, because being first in Europe carries real strategic value. The company that establishes early operational credibility, builds the regulatory relationships, and creates public familiarity with the concept will have significant advantages when the inevitable expansion begins. And expansion is clearly the plan. Verne has disclosed that discussions are already underway with 11 cities across Europe, the UK, and the Middle East, with more than 30 additional cities reportedly under evaluation. Those numbers suggest the Zagreb launch is genuinely a starting point rather than the destination. The long-term objective is a multinational autonomous ride-hailing network, operating at scale, competing directly with traditional taxis and conventional rideshare platforms. Whether that vision translates into reality depends on a lot of variables: regulatory progress, technology reliability, public acceptance, financing, but the ambition is clearly stated. The Uber partnership is arguably the most commercially significant element of the whole arrangement. Uber made a strategic decision years ago to exit the self-driving development business when it sold off its autonomous unit. And, since then, the company has consistently positioned itself as a platform that connects riders with mobility providers, regardless of who or what is doing the driving. Partnering with Verne and Pony AI fits that model precisely. Overnight, Verne's Robotaxis gain access to Uber's established user base without needing to independently build their own global customer acquisition from scratch. That's an enormous shortcut, and it's hard to overstate how much it could accelerate the service's growth once the operational side matures. The use of Chinese technology, both the BAIC-derived vehicles and Pony AI's autonomous systems, in a high-profile European commercial deployment is worth acknowledging directly. Pony AI has been aggressively pursuing international opportunities as domestic competition in China intensified and regulatory scrutiny increased. The Zagreb operation is among their most visible European deployments to date, and success here creates a credible reference point for conversations with other cities and partners. For Verne, working with proven technology reduces both development risk and the time to market considerably. The trade-offs around technology dependency and geopolitical sensitivities around Chinese systems and European infrastructure are real conversations happening across the industry. But they clearly haven't been prohibitive here. The current rollout is intentionally careful. Around 300 users reportedly have app access at this stage, with thousands more on a waiting list. That measured pace is standard practice across the autonomous driving industry now. The companies that rushed deployment and encountered serious incidents paid a significant reputational price, and nobody wants to repeat those lessons. Gradual scaling lets engineers and regulators monitor performance closely, identify edge cases, and build the operational confidence needed before opening the floodgates. Public acceptance remains the deepest uncertainty in all of this. The technology has come a long way, and demonstrations like the Zagreb launch provide useful evidence that autonomous systems can handle real urban conditions competently. But global incidents involving self-driving vehicles have left a lasting impression on public perception, and skepticism persists in ways that pure technical performance alone won't fully address. People need to accumulate their own direct experiences, and those experiences need to be consistently reassuring. The safety operator presence during this phase is partly regulatory requirement and partly a pragmatic acknowledgement that trust is built incrementally. The economic logic behind robotaxis, assuming the technology continues maturing, is compelling. A vehicle that operates nearly continuously without labor costs, optimizes its own routing, and reduces idle time fundamentally changes the unit economics of ride-hailing. Per-trip costs could fall substantially at genuine scale, which would make the service competitive with private car ownership for a meaningful portion of urban journeys. Cities benefit from reduced congestion and parking demand. The potential disruption to urban transportation is significant enough that every major mobility company is paying close attention, whether or not they're currently involved. The original Verne vision involved purpose-built autonomous pods with no steering wheel, reclining seats, expansive cabin space, and a lounge-like atmosphere designed specifically around the passenger experience. Those concepts, first shown publicly in 2024, remain the company's stated long-term direction. The current deployment using modified production SUVs is a pragmatic acceleration of the timeline, allowing commercial operation to begin years earlier than would have been possible waiting for proprietary hardware.